says it's recording, but it's not showing it. Well, we'll go with on faith here. I'll see. It's recording. It's recording, I hope. I'll put it on there later if it doesn't show up. Tonight's Leviticus 20. It's the penalties for the laws that's already given. Most of this reverts back to chapter 18, just 2 weeks ago when we talked about it. And it went through a bunch of the different offenses that it said that you needed to be careful of, and a lot of it was the sexual intercourse and things like that they had. Now, most of those they didn't have at the time. I mean, when we read through it, it didn't have a penalty with that law that was given. It gave the law, you shouldn't do this, but now is when in the next verse, chapter, a couple chapters, it's telling them what the reward is or the penalty. Verse 1 through 5. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Again thou shalt say to the children of Israel, Whosoever he be of the children of Israel, or of the strangers that sojourn in Israel, that giveth any of his seed unto Moloch, he shall surely be put to death. The people of the land shall stone him with stones, and I will set my face against that man, and cut him off from his people. Here's my place. Because he hath given of his seed unto Moloch, to defile my sanctuary, and to profane my holy name. And if the people of the land do any ways hide their eyes from the man when he giveth of his seed unto Moloch, and kill him not, then I will set my face against that man, and against his family, and will cut him off, and all that go a-whoring after him to commit whoredom with Moloch from their people. Now, we want to remember what they said in that Moloch is a god of the Canaanites that they had there, and in some of the other areas. But Moloch was one of them where they had a statue built, and they would heat that statue up. And for a sacrifice, they would place their babies in the arms of that statue until the baby burned to death. Another author said, well, they'd place that baby, it wouldn't die, they'd place that baby on there and it'd burn it as it passes through. They kind of say pass through, but it left an indelible mark. So it's kind of like marking, in branding that child. And so for whatever it is, it doesn't matter exactly what happens. They were sacrificing their children to this idol god. And God said, don't do that. That's what he said back then. That was one of the most offensive of the idols or of the gods that was in the land. And I don't know if it was also in Egypt or where exactly. I think it was more Canaanite. If we go back and look at chapter 18 again, I think it told us that it was more in that area where they were at. But to them, it was most offensive of that. And because of that, basically it required the worst or the penalty that was the harshest. Now, killing a person is harsh, but stoning a person, the Jewish law, that's the worst penalty that you can get, is stoning someone. Okay? Because you just get hit, and you just keep going. One of the things that I was reading and I was going through, and it may be in here, I was also reading Matthew Henry against, let's see if it's in here. No, it doesn't say that, I don't think. But what was interesting, it brought about, and all of these, it tells us what it should be done. But this is the one that would probably be more likely out of all the penalties that we see tonight in chapter 20. This is the one that will probably be done more as far as they can prove it. In Jewish law, you had to have 2 or 3 witnesses in order to have it. The rest of these as we go through, it'll point out, and one thing that as it gets further in and goes into with the man lying with his neighbor's wife and all this stuff, and that may be where it's at. I may be jumping the gun here a little bit telling you this, but that was where Jesus was referencing, okay, when they come back and they brought the woman that they caught in adultery and threw her mouth feet, threw her down and said, what are you going to do about it, basically. And what he said is, first he got down and started writing in the ground, writing in the dirt. And then they asked him, or something, and he got up and he said, whoever is without sin cast the first stone. What he was trying to tell them, if you're a witness, the witness had to cast the first stone. Okay? So if it's 2 or 3 witnesses, those 2 or 3 people had to be the ones. So Jesus is calling upon them, and they're just saying, oh. And also, hey, Jesus, he didn't say this, but he's like, where's the guy? Because later on in this one, both of them shall be stoned. That's what it talks about. So here in this one, it's what's telling them that they're going to be stoned if you worship this God. If you're doing this, passing your children through this god Moloch into the fire, sacrificing your child, it's worthy of death for you. The worst that Israel or Jewish tradition could have them for. It's the worst penalty that they had.
So were they able to do this beforehand and not have any punishments for doing it?
It wasn't set up. See, that's one of the things as they went through the 400 years in Egypt, it gradually started building in, just like in America. Things started getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And we can't say, but it's just like now, 200 years, we haven't really seen God come down 1,000 years since Jesus, 2,000 years. There hadn't been that many miracles to prove, lightning come down and zap somebody that did something. We haven't seen that. And I don't say you have to see that, but God is the one, and what does he say? God is, his vengeance is mine, saith the Lord.
So in other words, they had been doing some of this and getting by with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so now the Lord's laying down this law saying, okay, now if you continue to do this, you're going to be put to death.
And part of this, you got to remember, is I'm not so sure that they were doing it. It may have been. But they brought some people in that left Egypt with them that were, quote, non-Jewish, but now they wanted to be.
The sojourners?
Yeah, the sojourners, the strangers in the lands. They want to serve this God, and he's just laying down the law. Because as others, they may have married. One of them may be a Jew, and the other one may not. And they married together, and they bring about their, customs with them. That's what happened to Solomon. With his 300 wives and 700 concubines, he let them do whatever they wanted to do. If they, pleased him, he'd build a temple for whatever God they wanted. And that wasn't what God wanted. That's why it started going further and further away.
Do we assume here where he's talking about turning a blind eye or whatever, that if you witnessed it and didn't say anything,
yeah,
would your whole family get stoned then?
We'll get into that a little bit later, I think, if you remind me, I'll try to find it in here, but that's what it's saying. And all through this, we talked about it in 18, and we're talking about it here. The last portion that says, and all that go a-whoring after him. What he's saying is, you love them, that guy, the idol, whatever worship, more than you love God. Here again, it's going back to the marriage, showing the marriage between a man and woman and God and us. It's that principle that he's talking about.
Well, it sounds like that he said, the Canaanites that lived there, whether they came in with Israel or not, it's all of a sudden, it is the law. The Canaanites can't do that, or Israel should be stoning them.
They can't. No, they can't. This is judged for Israelites.
Okay.
Now, God judges them in them rooting them out, as we see as they go forward. When they go into the land, There are several times he tells them, wipe them out.
Mhm.
Kids, ladies, men, animals, everything. Just wipe it out. And that's the way he takes care of it. Here again, this is laying it down for God's people. As he said earlier, I want you to be a peculiar people, a separated, holy people. And this is your rules. Now, everybody else should follow it. But since they're not, they're following their own gods. I'll take care of them. And it kind of says that as we get down through here.
But those that come and, in other words, want to be have God as their God and live in that, they do have to live by it.
Correct.
And they
will suffer the consequences. Yeah. That's right.
Boy, just to think about offering your child up for sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
And, sometimes we read and you see stuff and read about Hitler and what they did. But you know what, man, when you see man even today, how wicked man's heart is. Mm-hmm. When you see young people on television wanting, like abortion right up until the point of death. Now some of them's even wanting 28-day extension.
Right.
When I see that, he said if he didn't cut the day short for the elect's sake, mm-hmm. no man would be, wow, frightening almost.
It is. It is.
But God is God. I don't mean we let doubt come with the world. I look at my great-grandchildren. Mm-hmm. I don't know how much longer we have, but what in the world will they have to face?
That's right. That's right. It's getting worse and worse all the time.
Yeah.
And it's just, it could be any time, like I said. Okay, it does say there, okay, in that last part or verse 5, then I will set my face against that man and against his family. Okay, now that's talking about the one that passes through, if they're passing through the child. So it's not just the person that's doing the sacrificing, but that whole family will be impacted. And we'll see here a little bit later. We'll go a little further into that for the rest of it. Brother Epperson, verse 6.
And the soul that turneth after such as have familiar spirits and after wizards and go whoring after them, I will even set my face against them, against that soul, and cut him off from among his people. Sanctify yourself, therefore, and be holy, for I am the Lord your God, and ye shall keep my statutes and do them. I am the Lord which sanctifies you.
Okay. Now this one's a little bit, it's not as stringent or as harsh. Okay. If they go after familiar spirits, he's not saying you should, but if you do, and if they go after the wizards, I will set my face against you, your soul, and cut him off from among his people. So he's no longer going to be a part of the people. Now he can repent, come back, okay, just like we've seen some of the others. But here he's saying, I'm going to set you aside. You're not doing what I told you to do.
So whenever it says, we'll cut him off, that doesn't mean he's going to kill that person?
He's not going to kill them in this particular case. Right down here in that A, it says, in this specific passage, God gave Israel nothing to do regarding the penalty. He simply said that he would execute the penalty. Involvement in such a practices will always separate someone from God. And that's what it's saying. If you're doing this, I'm not going to have anything with you. We saw that when Saul went and talked to, conjured up, had the wizard or whoever conjure up Samuel. And Samuel rebuked him. I mean, when he did come up. It's not saying it can't be done. Okay, a lot of people say, oh, that's much food. I'm not saying it can't be done. The devil has his ways of doing things. And sometimes that is through that. But it won't ever, it's not ever going to win out over God. A lot of times they want to see their future and see all these things. The devil can't see the future. A lot of people think that they can. The devil and his minions, his ones, angels, they can't see the future. But you know what? They got 6,000 years of history, and they've seen every trick in the book, and they know how to try it. And so it looks like that sometimes they know what's going to happen. They know what the future is going to be. They say, well, I see this guy getting into this, he's going to do this. And just like us today, we could prophesy on that too, but you're not a prophet because it'd be 80 or 70% success rate. That's not a prophet. God is the only one that knows the future and knows what's going to happen and when it's going to happen.
Well, when it's talking about the family, is it just talking the immediate family?
I don't think so.
I was wondering, you know, if one of the young men or women, for that matter, witnessed it and didn't do anything, does that affect 3 or 4 generations living in the same household?
If it's known, I think, I think it should be. Now, it's kind of one of those things that's not, don't talk, what is it? Don't talk, don't tell, don't, something, what they used to say. It's not that. It's like, don't ask, don't tell. It's like, if I didn't see it, if I saw it, and my son heard me say that I saw it, he's not responsible for it. I am. Okay, because I was the witness. Now, God will use that. He will put us off. He puts me off, and that may put God off from him because I may not be influencing him like I should. You see what I'm saying? It's an in a roundabout way. That it's not his responsibility, or your daughters, or whoever you might have, or your grandparents.
Like when we went to Germany on one of the trips, we went into the family coached house there, and there was 3 generations living in that house. Each one had their own story or what.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I wondered, how extensive was that?
I think it depends on what it is. Just like we saw here. That one's not so much, it's going to cut him off from his people. It's the person that's doing it. If it's somebody in the house and they're doing this wizardry or trying to go to necromancer or all these different type people, and he's quiet about it, nobody else knows about it, I don't know how that he could be. I don't know God's mind. I'll say it that way. But
one there, every time it talks about cutting off, if we continue to do that, we're cut off from God.
Right.
We're lost.
Well, it's the same way today when he says the only way that anyone's going to separate me from God is me.
Yeah.
If I don't go to God, if I don't give him a chance to redeem me, I can't get saved.
Yeah. Well, it says, "Come unto me, all you that labor," but at the same time, but we can leave him.
Yes, that's right. And we can, as you say, drift away. It goes back, and it's one of those things. It doesn't go into. That's where Jesus kind of corrected it. I think the law, like we said before, the law is kind of the sidewalk, the gutters on the sidewalk. It keeps us in the boundaries. Yeah, there's a lot of things outside of there that may, special cases, but that's what Jesus said. It's what's in your heart.
Well, Jesus always, like when he caught the lady in adultery, when the people, he said he cast, without sin cast the first stone. I looked around, all the accusers were gone. Mm-hmm. But then he said, "Go and sin no more." Mm-hmm. In essence, that's the message he's saying right here.
That's right.
Go and sin no more.
And the same like the lady at the water as well. Go call your husband. Well, I ain't got a husband. Well, I know you don't. And goes into the story. But it's just one of those things that once you hear the truth and you don't accept it, it's on you. You got to be able to accept that truth. Okay. Let's go on to 9. Sister Janet, would you read 9 for us? Unless anybody had any questions.
For everyone that curseth his father or his mother shall be surely put to death. He hath cursed his father or his mother, his blood shall be upon him.
Okay. Now this is,
I'm glad I love my daddy.
yeah, this is,
Say what?
I said, I'm glad I love my mom and daddy.
it says several, virtually it says all the commentators agree this is not an outburst of a small child, okay, or even an adolescent. It's against their parent. But it's a settled heart of an adult child against their parent. Such intergenerational warfare was not to be tolerated and was punishable by death. Here, this was a crime against the family and the community. Because if you break down the family, eventually the community will fall apart. It is. It says, unlike other ancient Near Eastern civilizations, in Israel, crimes of a religious nature or against the family received the strongest punishment. This pattern contrasts with the laws of the ancient Near East, where violations resulting in economic loss tend to be treated more severely. So, somebody stole from you, they took that. That's where they're taking a hand or finger or ear or whatever for just what we would say, well, gosh, today they let you get away still under $1,000, and you're back out on the trail to do it again the next day. They just don't care, it seems like. This command against cursing's one parent was quoted by Jesus as he spoke to the religious leaders in Matthew and Mark. Jesus observed that they used clever, hypocritical tricks to avoid fulfilling the spirit of this command. So that's where Jesus was talking a couple of times, and they said, if you tell Raka to your father and mother, and it's saying, I don't know you, I don't know you, you have a need, and I'm not part of you anymore. Well, that's not Jesus. They were still part of the family, and it falls upon him because, and we call cursing, it's where they curse them, so where they wish they would die, they would be a death. And people, like we talked about last week, curses, the people believed in that okay, if you're cursed, then God cursed them, for some reason. That people was cursed. And that's what he's trying to get around them. He's still trying to show the family is the unit. The one you need to be respectful even until the time that your parents are gone. Even after, in my opinion, your parents are gone, that you need to have respect for them. And it says there, he says his blood shall be upon him. It doesn't say it's death, but later on it says it will be. It's one of the harshest penalties that they have.
I've known some families, and some of them have been part of my family, extended, and their dad, some of them, their dads were in retirement, and but I don't know where but you would never hear them saying anything negative about their dad.
Right.
And again, like Brother Harold said, especially back then, you liable to have 4 generations living under a compound together, and I guess you can rub one another the wrong way.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Remember Dad said one time we had a little 900 some square foot house, and he said, "Now get your bearing off, not on."
Yep. If we go and look a little further in Deuteronomy 21, it states that the parents did not have the right to carry out the punishment that's associated with this, but they had to bring the accused child before the elders and the judges of the city. Okay, so here again it comes into play. You have to have some witnesses, and unless it's really tolerant, it says as a practical matter, the judges of Israel rarely, if ever, administered the death penalty because of this. Yet the child was held accountable. The expression indicates that his blood shall be upon you, indicates that the person who committed the act is alone responsible for his own death. The death can't be shared with anyone else. So that kind of goes back to what you was asking earlier a little bit. And like I said, it depends on which law you're talking about, the way he talks about it. Okay, 10, Harold?
And the man that committeth adultery with another man's wife, even he that committeth adultery with his neighbor's wife, the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death.
And this is where I was talking about earlier. And that's where he called up, and it's probably in here. It talks about, and double I says, this helps us to understand what Jesus did when he confronted the religious leaders who brought to him the woman taken in adultery. By their presence and their words, they claimed to have caught the woman in the act. Okay? But they did not also bring the guilty man. First wrong thing. And second, no one was willing to identify themselves as the witnesses. So that's where, in knowing that, Jesus, put them in their place. They were trying to catch him in doing something, is what they're trying to do. Go against the law. And he's not condoning that at all, right there. Because he didn't condemn her. Well, he did correct her. He said, don't do it again. Go and sin no more. And that's what he does on a lot of, and people today, they get caught up in that. Well, Jesus didn't talk anything about this. Well, Jesus did talk about a lot of stuff that we don't know today, but he did talk about a lot of things that was in the Old Testament, and the Old Testament was still what he was living his life by. But then he summed it up by saying, there's two things that you can do. When the young ruler asked him, love the Lord thy God with all thy soul and mind and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. And that's hard to do.
Well, it's just like here, like he said, go and sin no more.
Mm-hmm.
Then he made, you pay tithes on your knees to come, and you got it down to fine art.
Yeah.
But you've omitted the weightier matters of the laws. In other words, doing what's right. And then he said, these ought you have done, and not leave the other undone.
That's right. Yeah, they should, if you're going to follow the law, the way you do, it's kind of one of those things, and it's the way lawyers are. As far as, let me read that again. And it really, that's why we have so many laws and so many interpretations of laws, because somebody brings up something that's just a different word, and then what's the definition of thief? You go back to that. It's just like, what? But that's what, a lawyer will go about and try to do whatever it is to get by with it.
Well, I was thinking the same thing. They always come out and listen to the radio, and they were talking about the college loan thing.
Oh, yeah.
And, President Biden and all these cats, well, I have the right to do that, have the right to do that. Then you got the others, no, you don't have the right to. And I'm thinking, now they got 9 people up there, and it might go 5 and 4, I mean, everybody's got their opinion.
That's right. That's right. And it's one of those things, but that makes, quote, the law of the land. And they look for it any way they can to get their foothold in it so they can do what they want to, it seems like. At least that's what they're doing now. It says in ancient Israel, this was the strongest way to simply say adultery is wrong. Cursing your parents is wrong. Incest is wrong. Even if those who commit these sins escape the penalty, God regarded it as wrong, and the community of Israel regarded it as wrong. Okay? Haven't talked about it yet, but incest is next. 11 and 12. And the man that lieth with his father's wife and covered her father's nakedness, both of them shall surely be put to death. their blood shall be upon them. And if a man lie with his daughter-in-law, both of them shall surely be put to death. They have wrought confusion. Their blood shall be upon them. And we go back to Leviticus 18, and it talks about it. This confusion or perversion is what it's saying, is out of harmony with the normal order of creation. And it says it legitimately translates this as incest here. The word, what we would say was incest. The penalty for the crime was not explained here. God declared that in ancient Israel it should be punished by death. Incest is a sin that murders families and was not to be permitted. Okay, and here again, we know that today. The law, they don't let us, get close relationships because it starts making, children that are what we call inbred. They usually have a lot of deformities when that happens because they're too close. We saw that a lot in the old times, in the dark ages, I guess.
Again, to me, it puts the emphasis on how important God sees the family.
Mm-hmm.
And even when we get into the New Testament, when Jesus compares the marriage to the bride, the church,
Mm-hmm.
and Jesus, and again, we wonder why it's so perverted. The society we live in today is because the family's been so perverted.
That's right. That's what he was trying to say all through these. Every time he says that their goal, it's basically you're doing what you want to do, and I told you that this is the way it should be done in all these different things. And it tries to relate back to a marriage.
Well, you go through even from the physical standpoint. Some of these things I know today we can't relate to a lot of those things, but they cut down on the neural disease.
Mm-hmm.
They cut down on spreading disease,
Mm-hmm.
and also they build up the family of God, Israel,
Mm-hmm.
to be true to their roots, and God requires we're a physical. We're now a spiritual house of God.
And again, this was commonplace, evidently, in this area, in the Canaanite area, all the different gods and things. They didn't have respect for a family, evidently. Not as the way God was separating the Jewish people out.
Well, even at the time of Christ, the Roman Empire, how perverted they were, and things that went on.
Yep. Verse 13, if a man also lie with mankind as he lieth with a woman, both of them have committed an abomination. They shall surely be put to death. Their blood shall be upon them. So that's going back, as we talked about before, in 18 and 22, sexuality is, God is against that. It says they shall surely be put to death. In Deuteronomy 17, it commands the death penalty for this. We should note this was the same punishment for adultery or incest. It's, again, like you said, it's regarded as these other family killing sins. With these things, it's just not family, to help the family. You don't have a family with two men or two women. Yeah, you have two people, but they're not going to be able to procreate. Can't get words out. 14, Brother Epperson.
And if man hath a wife and her mother, it is wickedness. They shall be burnt with fire, both he and they, that there be no wickedness among you.
Okay. Adam Clark, in his commentary, thought that the burn shall be burned with fire did not refer to execution. Says it's very likely the crime mentioned in this verse was not punished by burning alive, but by some kind of branding, by which, after that, they were rendered infamous. And anybody read The Scarlet Letter? where she got branded with a A for adultery. Well, that's kind of what they think that, and if you had that, there's no way of hiding it if it's on your arm or your forehead or wherever that they branded them. So we don't know exactly how they burned them with fire, but that may have been what one commentator is thinking. (15 and 16), Janet?
If a man lie with a beast, he shall surely be put to death, and you shall slay the beast. And if a woman approach unto any beast, and lie down thereto, thou shalt kill the woman and the beast. They shall surely be put to death, their blood shall be upon them.
Okay. This goes back to the bestiality, that it's not anything, there's no way they can procreate. God didn't put it here for that. And why kill the animal? Well, if the animal's there and the person's dead, that animal would still carry that connotation upon them, so they kill both of them. That way it's taken care of. It's not going to be part, and it's not pushed forward. Not saying that the animal has, quote, any part of it, but that way it's done away with. It won't be a reminder for people.
This is assuming to me, though, that somebody knows that somebody's doing this.
Exactly.
I mean, does nothing get done in secret?
All of this, and it could be, but that's what it's saying. It could be. You think people have secrets, and they do, but if you stay around somebody very long, you'll find it out. I guarantee every week Darla hears more than she wants to in that Sunday school class. And all the others it's been for, and school teachers and everything else, they hear more than there's no secrets really in a family. They're there. But it is true. Here again, in all these, you have to have 2 or 3 witnesses before the death penalty is called upon. So, if the farmer comes upon them or going and they find out, then you've got to call somebody else together in order for that to happen. And it seems like that's the immediate punishment, but if they're not caught, God still is going to deal with them on anything else. It may seem like to us in our lifetime, we've seen things happen, we say, why do the bad people always get off with other stuff? God's going to deal with them eventually. And it may seem like a cop-out, but if they don't accept God, they will understand what hell is like when they leave this earth, because that's separation from God, and they don't know what, everybody says, well, I want to go where we party. Well, there ain't going to be no parties down there. It's going to be total, it's hard to say, but when we look at Lazarus and the rich man, the story that Jesus told, or some of the others that all through the Bible, Lazarus, it's excruciating pain. They bite their own tongue. Says, I think in Peter, that they, it's reserved. It wasn't made for us to begin with. It was made for the devil and his angels, because they were the ones that first left him. So it may not.
Go back to 14 for a second, maybe
Sure.
you can clarify something.
Sure, I'll try.
It says, and if a man take a wife and her mother.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they were doing multiple wives as far as marriages.
Mm-hmm.
But is that not saying that he couldn't marry the mother too? Or
I'm thinking
just he couldn't take the mother.
You go back and look at 18, and it says there 18 and 17, the chapter. It's like they can't have sex at the same time. And I'm not saying they can have sex later. I think if they married and the mother died, the wife died, and then he married her daughter, I still think that is saying that that's not right, because it's close kin. I don't.
Well,
Well, even when the concubines you might have had a couple of sisters in there.
Right.
But you couldn't have a mother and a daughter.
Right.
I mean, in other words, usually they were young women that were virgins, and they were presented. They were there in case, here we go back, under the law, in case they wanted another. They didn't go out here in the land. They went to those concubines and chose one of those.
And as we look at Esther, he had the king, and that wasn't an Israel king, but they had to go through this process. It's 2 years or something, wasn't it, before Esther was even called up to go to the king. So there was a process that they had to go through. And
I guess at this time, there was, you read all this stuff, but if you study history, Roman history and different stuff, all this kind of stuff was happening.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, this is further back than even the Roman history, but this has been happening. Remember when at the flood, it said every imagination of the mind was on evil continually. And God cleaned it up at one time, but then just a couple of thousand years later, we're back in the same shape that we were. Right. And these things were happening.
Well, you know the story of the family. The husband died.
Mm-hmm.
Then it was supposed to be the next sons to take the wife.
The brother.
That one brother that had died. And they were supposed to keep going and keep going down the line.
Yes.
Was that only because of there not being an offspring?
Yes.
That
that's
they
true.
was able to keep going down the line?
But that's a brother and a brother. We're talking about a mother and a daughter.
Well, yes, I realize those are men and not women.
No. I'm just saying that sex with the mother.
Kin.
Yeah.
They were not blood kin.
They were not blood kin.
They were kin by marriage. Mm-hmm. Okay. If they were blood kin, they could not get married.
Right.
In other words, it was a brother, and the brother dies, and he's got another brother, and that brother, he marries the woman.
Yes.
But that's not his blood. Or you understand what I'm saying? The incest comes in when you're mixing the blood.
Right.
Okay, the family. That's what it causes the deformities and stuff. But now it was just, in other words, for instance, I got one brother, he's my baby brother, and if, and back then, I'd marry Liz, and then if I died, and he was not married, he married my wife. Okay?
Right.
So that was strictly for the lineage?
Yes.
It was okay.
And it was not not mixing the blood.
Right. Because if you have a father and marries a woman, if he has a daughter, that's his daughter. And he dies, they can't have sex with those. If a man comes in and has sex with the mother, you can't have sex with her daughter too, because that's what it's saying. But two brothers, it's a treat. It's whether it's a man or a woman. It could be this other way too. It could be a father and a son if it was a woman. You can't have sex with those either. Okay? You see there, if a woman had sex with the father, she shouldn't have sex with the son too. Because it could be that's her son, and that's who grows. Or if she was a stepwife, it'd still be wrong because that's his blood. His father dies, but it's still his father's blood in him. That's too close a relationship. That's what they're saying. They're near kin.
I couldn't marry my mother. Okay. Couldn't marry my sister. Now, if something happened, I could marry Liz's sister. Or you understand, if she was free to marry.
Yeah.
Okay? Because, in other words, we would not be intermingling blood. She has her DNA. Her DNA has nothing to do with my DNA.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we have an offspring, that offspring's will have our DNA. Okay? But it was the like you said, especially when Israel did that, it was for the continuation of the family line.
Right.
Okay?
And that's what
And it
Moses,
wasn't incest. Okay? In other words, if that had been his sister, okay, and a guy dies, and then her brother couldn't marry her. Okay, are you understanding what I mean?
Sort of. It gets kind of deep.
Yeah, right.
yeah, yeah, okay, but good enough. I know it may not be explained as well as it can, but it's not saying that that's okay the other way. The other way, where they said that's to promote the lineage and keep the lineage going, but it's the bloodline that they're concerned about. Up until this time, there may have been some of that going on. And that's why he put this into place. There had to be some. We know, going back to Noah and going back to Adam and Eve, there had to be some marrying their daughters and marrying their sisters and aunts and uncles and all the different things. But
Moses' father and mother were
they were the same lineage.
lineage.
Yeah.
They were like
They were both Levites, I think. Yeah.
It was like his grandfather on one side, and then like his great grandfather on the mother's side, or whichever way it was.
Right, right. And it's kind of like, to me, I like the numbers, but it's like I said last week, I think, I'm 50% of my mom and 50% of my dad. But I'm 25% of my grandma, maternal side, 25% of my grandpa on my maternal side, and then same thing on the other. So it's been, as you go back, you get diluted a little bit. Now, me and my sister are both 50% of our mom and dad, but we're different. We're just completely different, but it's still saying that you can't go marry your sister because they're same blood. Even though we're different, we're still family. And that's too close a relationship, and it even goes down from there. So, I don't know. That may not help any at all, but confuse the issue more. 17 through 21, Harold? I think that.
And if a man shall take his sister, his father's daughter, or his mother's daughter, and see her nakedness, and she see his nakedness, it is a wicked thing, and they shall be cut off in the sight of their people. He hath uncovered his sister's nakedness, he shall bear his iniquity. And if a man shall lie with a woman having her sickness, and shall uncover her nakedness, he hath discovered her her fountain, and she hath uncovered the fountain of her blood, and both of them shall be cut off from among their people. And if thou shalt not uncover the nakedness of thy mother's sister, nor if thy father's sister, for he uncovereth his near kin, and they shall bear their iniquity. And if a man shall lie with his uncle's wife, he hath uncovered his uncle's nakedness. They shall bear their sin, they shall die childless. And if a man shall take his brother's wife, it is an unclean thing, he hath uncovered his brother's nakedness, and they shall be childless.
Okay. Now, is that confusing just because it says it?
Well, it does say his brother's wife. It doesn't
Right.
say his brother's widow.
And they're all alive.
Yeah, and they're all alive. I think that's what it's meaning in all these.
I mean, in other
In
words,
all.
it's not, nobody passed
Yes,
away. It's just-
Right. And we see that a lot back then because the woman, she had to have somebody protect her. So a lot of times they would remarry or they would stay with their family. They'd have to. And that's why in the New Testament it tells them to go ahead and remarry unless they're of a certain age, and then they can serve God. Because if they wanted to, I mean, not that they serve God, but they will dedicate their lives to God, because a younger woman will most likely want to be led astray if they're not, if they marry somebody else. If they don't marry somebody else, they let it get out of hand.
It's heavy duty stuff.
Goes back and it says that these, and it goes back and it talks here, uncover their nakedness. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. That's having sex with them, okay? Not just, and it's not going to see their nakedness, and that's not good either. But it's actually here, it talks about the incest. These are specific laws that were talked about in Leviticus And then it talks about the penalties here. They shall be cut off of their people in their sight. And that is driven out. They were exiled from Israel or excluded from the community until the sin was repented of or atoned of or cleansed through a ceremony of cleansing. And one of the things that does, it's not like you could repeatedly do it, but once you do that once, you kind of get the stigma with you. They know what you've repented of, and it's going back, and it's like, okay, you just do it, kind of like us today. Just go back and, you're just praying through to get the conviction off of you. Does that make sense? I mean, it allows that to happen, that they can come back in to the family or into the.
Can't you just imagine Moses trying to explain it?
I know it. Yep. Well, that's
No
right.
wonder he repeated it over and over.
I had to repeat it over and over. That's right. And it's talking about.
Thank you, Jesus.
Yeah. Talks about
For
down
the new
here
covenant.
that the childless, just means that they probably would not be able to have children or stripped of the children. But it also says they could have been, that they would be taken from them. And Matthew Poole offered one more suggestion, or shall not be reputed their genuine children, but they're excluded from those that are not, quote, true children. Illegitimate, in other words. Okay? Trying to finish this up in 22. Ye shall therefore keep all my statutes and all my judgments, and do them, that the land whither I bring you to dwell therein spew you not out. And ye shall not walk in the manners of the nation, which I cast out before you. For they committed all these things, and therefore I abhorred them. But I have said unto you, ye shall inherit their land. I will give it unto you to possess it, a land that floweth with milk and honey. I am the Lord your God, which have separated you from other people. Ye shall therefore put differences between clean beasts and unclean, between unclean fowls and clean, and ye shall not make your souls abominable by beast or by fowl, or by any manner of living thing that creepeth on the ground, which I have separated from you as unclean. And ye shall be holy unto me, for I, the Lord, am holy, and have severed you from other people, that ye should be mine. Again, telling them, because of this, being separated, being peculiar, being chosen for God, God's choosing them, they're going to be different. People are not going to understand some of the things that they're doing.
Well, that verse 23, it sort of shines light on the whole thing. He said, "You shall not walk in the manners of the nation,
Right.
which I cast out before you, for they have committed all these things,
Right.
and therefore I abhor them." They were getting ready to go into that land, and this was the custom of that land.
Right. And not like when they was in Egypt, they were doing some things that the Egyptians, were doing. But he's telling them, don't do that. And we do have one more in 27. A man also or a woman that hath a familiar spirit, or that is a wizard, shall surely be put to death. They shall stone them with stones, their blood shall be upon them. So in ancient Israel, if one consulted a medium, they were to be cut off, excluded from the community of Israel. But if someone was the actual practitioner of these occultic arts, they were to be put to death under the law. So if they were the ones doing it, if they went to somebody, then, okay, that was one thing. They were excluded. But if they were the ones being the medium or being all this, then they were going to be stoned. Here again, you had to have two or three witnesses before it was upon them. Okay?
This is so important, even for today.
Mm-hmm.
How that, when we serve the Lord, we can't do things that other people can do.
That's right. That's right.
We are supposed to be separate.
Mm-hmm.
And it's too bad that so many people think they can live like the world and claim to be Christians.
I went to give blood today, and they happened to be at the high school, and it was out in the common area where they had it back down there. Man, every one of them kids, I'm like, man, if we'd have dressed like they dressed and looked like they look like today, I was, I ain't been in school in forever, but I'm like, I don't think I'd let Daniel go to school like wearing some of those things like that. Just one of those things. It's just amazing.
Well, you understand that, I've said it for years, but it's so true. What one generation does in moderation, the next generation does in excess.
That's right.
And that's how come that the Bible says it's going to wax worse and worse and worse. But at the same time, the line is going to be drawn in the sand. Yeah. Like you said, clear. I mean, there may be a lot of people that go by religious or Christian, but when it comes down to it, the final say is going to be up to God, and it's His word.
Right.
And
so many things. It's I'm glad we have these rules that gives us a guideline. But then I'm so much gladder that we have the intercessor there that can make intercession for us. We don't have to do that. He's done all that for us.
I thank God for my heritage, my physical heritage, but I thank Him for my spiritual heritage too.
We don't seem to be, this is my opinion, we don't seem to be giving that opportunity to these younger generations to come around the altars and seek and grow spiritually.
Mm-hmm.
How many times have we had an altar service here in the last 2 years?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like you've got to give them that opportunity to grow, to gain that spiritual food and strength to go out against the evil forces and
That's right.
things,
I guess it's just, and I'm not saying anything about it, but I guess it's one of those things that we've seen a lot of young kids come through here, and we have had some come down, and then because of the situation that they're in, and we're not there all the time, and they come back and they may be there weekly for a while, and then they're gone. They reach an age where they can start driving or start getting a job, do their own things, and they're their own person then.
Well, that's true, but if we give them the tools when they're younger,
Yes, that's right.
to search and seek God, as the Holy Spirit in these services can fall and do a work that can't be done in another time. You know what I'm saying? Yeah,
and that's part of it, I think, too, that relies upon the family. How the family does it. It's we can only do so much here in our Sunday school. We're trying to teach them.
I was just going to say, I can remember sitting and going to the altars and praying, and that's where I gained a lot of the spiritual strength.
We went to the youth camps that we had. We'd go to the youth camps, and a lot of our kids would get saved there because it's an immersion almost. You're there for a week, and you feel the Spirit come upon you, and it's hard because it's one of those things the kids want to. Today, kids want to be entertained. That's what it is, and I'm not saying that's blatant all of them, but that's the way it's come up. I can see it in my little granddaughter. She watches a video about 10 seconds, and then she's on to the next video, and the next. She won't watch anything very long at all. And that's just part of this world that we have too much going on that we want to be a part of it. Where back then we had more time. I mean, we had church services 1, 2, 3, about 4 times a week for sure. If you didn't have a revival, you had Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, and then usually we had one of the nights was prayer meeting night, Monday or Tuesday or Thursday or Friday.
But if they get a taste of it, I feel like they would hunger for it.
They will, they
You
will.
know,
Mhm. But, I don't know, we're open to suggestions.
Well, like Jerry was there a while ago when he was, you know, so-called Christians, you know, if everybody in Oklahoma that claims to be Christian would get out and vote on this deal, then the marijuana deal would be voted down without much of a problem.
right.
Right.
The problem